investors, educators, welcome to Stanford. My name is Frederick Entry, and I am co-president of the Stanford Private Equity Club. On behalf of our corporate sponsors, McKinsey, Eli Lilly, JP Morgan, Warburg Pincus, on behalf of my conference co-chairs, Scott Kaufman, Chris Pierce, on behalf of the entire planning committee, it is my distinct privilege to welcome you to our 8th annual Principal Investment Conference. Henry Kissinger once observed, very astutely, that, quote, there cannot be a crisis next week because my schedule is already full. Despite the heavy schedules maintained by many investors, the crisis did come. Last summer, the world changed, and the knives are still falling. But amidst that chaos, there is opportunity. And as Warren Buffett observed, in a business, the rearview mirror is clearer than the windshield. Today, leaning on the knowledge of 4 august keynotes and 43 world-class panelists, drawing on the collective brain trust of 175 professionals and 225 students gathered here, and leveraging 8 panels and 30 roundtables, we hope to gain some clarity as we look back in that rearview mirror and ahead through that windshield. To kick off that exciting journey, we are thrilled to be joined by one of the greatest real estate dealmakers of our time. And apropos to introduce him, we present one of Stanford's finest. George Parker earned his MBA and PhD in 1962 and 67, respectively, from the Stanford Business School. He served in the Peace Corps in Peru and taught at Columbia in New York. Nostalgic for the fine climes of Palo Alto, he joined the Stanford faculty in 1973 and has been here ever since. In those 35 years, George has won many awards, written many cases, taught many classes, advised many boards, and inculcated in many generations of MBA students the sound principles of corporate finance. In the words of his esteemed colleague, Professor James Van Horn, George Parker holds the record for the longest-running case taught here at Stanford Business School. For 25 years, he's taught the American Home Products case. George understands the notion of return on investment. Ladies and gentlemen, it is my great pleasure to call on one of Stanford's finest, Professor George G.C. Parker.
Thank you, Frederick. Only Van Horn has been here long enough to know how long I've been teaching that. I'm amazed, however, that he can remember. Thank you, Frederick, and good afternoon. I want to say what a great pleasure it is to introduce Tom Barrack, who's today's keynote speaker. Tom is a friend and has been a colleague of mine for 10 years on the board of directors of Continental Airlines and more recently on the board of directors of the First Republic Bank in San Francisco and New York. I can attest to the fact that he's one of the savviest private investors and business executives that I've ever met. In this brief introduction, let me tell you a few things about Tom because his is an extraordinary story. Tom was born into a modest family in the San Fernando Valley in Los Angeles. His grandparents had immigrated there from Lebanon many years before. Tom's dad and mother owned and operated a family grocery store where he worked during his school years right through high school. Ultimately, however, he left home to attend the University of Southern California and the USC Law School, where he graduated in 1972. While at USC, Tom's great competitive spirit was on view as he was a star player on the championship USC rugby team. He is today one of USC's most illustrious alumni. That is, at least among those who did not play football. After graduation, Tom went into the practice of law, but he's really too good for that. And he only stayed briefly with the law. He then joined the famous Southern California construction company called the Fluor Corporation. They, in turn, perhaps partly because of his Lebanese ancestry, sent him to Saudi Arabia, to negotiate on behalf of the Fluor Corporation with the royal family. He was good at it. Tom knows how to negotiate. He knows how to buy low and sell high. I hope we stress the importance of that enough in my class. It really is, it's a good idea. In 1976, Tom returned to the U.S. and wound up working for a Texas real estate operation run by a man named Lonnie Dunn. After a couple years in Texas, Tom took a little detour and went to work in Washington as Deputy Undersecretary of the Interior in the Reagan administration. I guess it's probably true that the Interior Department, with all of its parks and public lands, is the closest thing the U.S. government has to a real estate operation. And it was logical that Tom would work there. After Washington and a very brief stop along the way in investment banking, Tom went to work for the well-known private equity investors, which are the Bass Group in Fort Worth, Texas. That's when Tom's acumen for a deal blossomed even more. In 1989, on behalf of the Bass Group, he bought the Plaza Hotel in New York as part of a much larger transaction, but he paid $250 million for it and promptly flipped it to Donald Trump for $410 million. Most people here probably think of Donald Trump as the flipper, not the flippee, but Barrick got that relationship just about right. Then he engaged in an act of financial courage that subsequently had a huge payday. He engineered the purchase of about $1 billion in mortgage loans from the Resolution Trust Company, which was the U.S. government receiver for most of the bankrupt savings and loan assets in the late 1980s. Since not many people wanted those underpriced bad loans, he bought them for 50 cents on the dollar and wound up making them worth much, much more. Because that investment yielded such a high return, to many people it all looked quite obvious in retrospect. But at the time, there were those who believed it was much more an act of courage than of wisdom. Indeed, it has to make one think, as I did in preparing these remarks, about all the opportunities that may, underline may, be there in today's subprime debacle. After the RTC deal, Tom was solidly back in real estate, where his timing has been legendarily exquisite. Fortune magazine has called Tom arguably the best real estate investor on the planet today. Colony Capital, where he is the chairman and CEO, runs nearly $40 billion in assets, mostly real estate, but also including hotels and gaming, where they are the third or fourth largest gaming company in the world. Colony is in 12 countries, has achieved a compound internal rate of return of about 20% for the last decade and a half. His limited partners are from all around the U.S. and the world and include some of the nation's largest and most important public and private pension funds. Colony employs over 6,000 people in its operating companies, actually a few more than that, I think. So it's not just about money, it's also about people. Finally, Tom is one of the highest energy people I have ever met, and he knows how to play as well as work. Many of you know I love horses. Well, Tom is a horseman's horseman. He is the owner of over 60 polo ponies and owns a polo team of his own on which he plays regularly. He also owns one of the most beautiful ranches anywhere in California, located in the Santa Ynez Valley near Santa Barbara. That's where his polo ponies graze and rest up while the boss is away, generating the money to feed them. It's a great pleasure to welcome Tom Barrick to Stanford as our keynote speaker for the 2008 Principal Investing Conference. Tom?